Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for those who joined. I think we still are expecting a few, but I think we'll make a start and we shall jump straight in. So thank you very much for joining us this morning. My name is Richard Rees from CSTEM. I am Head of Solution Sales. I'm here today with my colleague, Mike Hatherall, who's Head of our Technical Services, who'll be running through the demo on the device security. So just to give you a little bit of a background on CSTEM, and perhaps before we start, if there are any questions that anybody has, feel free to post them in the group chat section. And at the end of the webinar, we will try and endeavour to answer some of those questions, time allowing. So communication STEM. STEM is actually an acronym for Systems and Techniques equals Effective Management. So we are providers of IT solutions and services that focus on the delivery of productivity and value. And we are great believers in the fact that even though you'll have a plethora of technology, it's very much how you use it depends on the business outcomes that you get from that technology. So a little bit about CSTEM. We are very much focused on relationships. We genuinely believe and passionately believe that they actually underpin the outcomes that you can get from technology, and the way that we endeavor to work with the relationships. We actually look to ensure the business outcomes, not just functionality. So where do we fit? We actually pride ourselves on being complementary. We do acknowledge that a lot of organizations would have had previous investments in systems and technologies to do certain skill sets that they require them to do. We don't actually compete with that or conflict with it. We do acknowledge that everybody has competing demands on time and resource, skills, budgets. So we acknowledge that you're running at a certain level of effectiveness, and we operate in that little space above to help you bridge the gap between actual and target effectiveness. So let's take a little bit of a look at the landscape of why we're here today. First and foremost, let's have a look at our people. So we've all got organizations that we deal with. We have internal teams, we have external teams, we have supply chains, we have project teams, and a lot of communications touch a lot of people. But we've also got everybody now is connected. Data is in real time. We have a lot of transient communications where people just drop in and out of communications into protocols, into teams. And what we're actually seeing is a plethora of devices appearing on networks. And these devices, again, down to the transient nature, are appearing and disappearing sometimes within seconds or minutes. You might not even know they're there if you're doing scheduled monitoring and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a challenge for a lot of people, and certainly in the healthcare sector, you can add in the IoTs, you can add in medical devices, and a lot of these devices, sometimes you can't load agent software on, so there's an element of, from time to time, they're actually invisible. So what we're looking to cover off today is fundamentally 5 of the main use cases. So my colleague Mike will run through a little demo shortly at a high level to give you an overview, but we look to tackle these 5 main reported use cases that are considered to deliver the highest level of impact. That is asset management. This is looking at all your devices in real time. Is the device compliant? Does it meet the requirement that you set to be non-risk? Who has access to the network? What you then do with the network segments, so different devices accessing different parts of the network, and also then incident responses. And I think everybody on here from the healthcare will probably be familiar with WannaCry. I'm sure Mike will run through a little bit of a story behind that a little bit later on. So that's my piece. That's my introduction to CSTEM, what we're looking to achieve today. And on that note, I shall hand you over to my colleague, Mike, for a run through of the device visibility.
Great, thanks, Rich. So yeah, if you can just stop sharing your screen and then just pop me as host, I can pop up my screen. Great, you should be able to see my screen now. Rich, can you confirm? Okay, great. So yeah, hi everybody. As Rich said, my name is Dr. Mike Hatherall. I am the engineering manager and head of professional services here at Communication STEM. I'm going to give you a very high level overview of our solution, our NAC solution. Obviously, following today, we hope to get to speak to you more on a one-to-one basis and go into more of your use case scenarios. So please forgive me by the fact that this will be quite high level. As Richard said, I'm going to cover off our 5 use cases: asset management, device compliance, network access control, segmentation, and incident response. However, I'm not going to do them in that order. I'm going to do them in a slightly more logical order. So very briefly, without kind of trying to offend or teach any of you guys how to suck eggs, what is network access control? So very briefly, network access control was very much, when it first started, I'm on the network, I'm off the network. Who is allowed on my network and who is not allowed, what is not allowed. Network access control has come so far since it started. It used to be just that, on, off the network. Now it is so much more than network access control. We talk about asset management, we talk about device compliance, we talk about segmentation, incident response, etc. So it's grown from just being on or off the network. However, its fundamental basis is still the same, based along a little thing we like to say of visibility. How can you protect what you can't see? How can you control if you don't know it's there? So that is what network access control is about. We can give you guys 99.9% visibility of your entire network. If it is connected via wire or wireless and it has a MAC address, we can see it. Doesn't necessarily need to have an IP address, doesn't need to be a machine with an operating system. It can be an IoT device, it can be a smart TV, a screen, a door access controls, CCTV, all the way through to operational technology. So it doesn't need just to be your conventional, is it a Windows machine, is it a server, etc. So what we do is, jumping into the screen that you'll see in front of you, this is what we call the single pane of glass that will help you guys kind of be able to maneuver around what you're actually seeing. Here we see a brief overview of the machines, their IP addresses, what segment they're connected to. If we've got it tied in with Active Directory, we also see the username of who's connected. We can see things such as which switch they're connected to, which switch port alias they're connected to, what their switch port name is. We can even see what function they are, if they're a computer or an IoT device, etc. So that's our kind of quick overview. Beneath that, you can see a little bit more information on the machine that you're actually connected on. So as you change the machine, you start to see it. You've got a nice little scroll bar here for you to go down and have a little look into more depth. But obviously, I'll go into that in a second to give you more of a view of what you can actually see on the device. Here, this is what we call our policy view. So this is where we control what we're actually doing with the endpoints. Again, I will go into more detail on that in a second. And here is our segments. These are our organizational segments, how your company is split up. This could be different locations. It could be, as you see here, the US location, the EU location, or it could just simply be headquarters and then broken up into, departments such as HR, finance, etc., etc. So this is a segmental view. And the basis of the idea of segments is that we might not want to run the same policies on HR as we do on finance, or as you do in your public wireless, for example. So we can pick and choose by building our network up with segments, how we actually run our policies, and we can do different things to different locations and different machines. So the first thing we do is a thing called primary classification. So what we're doing here, and obviously we're only looking at 108 machines on this demo, so you have to kind of think bigger for your networks. What we do here is we go, okay, very quickly, what is the device that we're looking at? Is it a printer? Is it a VoIP device? Is it a Windows machine, a Mac machine? Is it a mobile device, etc., etc.? We put it into a bucket as quickly as we possibly can. Now we start working with groups. From the very start, we start working with groups. This makes it easier for us a little bit down the line. So what we do is, as soon as we identify a machine, which is a Windows machine, and there's a lot of kind of things that happen in the background that will enable us to identify a Windows machine as a Windows machine. Things like net BIOS information, OS information, etc., etc. But these are obviously proprietary and they're built up within the technology of the counteract. So when we discover what the machine is, we're going to add it to a group so we can later work with groups. And very simply here, we're going to add it to a group called Windows. Now, it's important to say at this point that primary classification doesn't take into any account whether you're corporate owned, whether you're non-corporate owned, whether you're BYOD, IoT, it doesn't matter. If you're on the network, you're going to be classified as to who you are, or sorry, what your device is. That's primary classification. Following primary classification, we're going to then further clarify the devices. Now, this means that we're going to decide what devices are corporate, what devices are non-corporate, what devices might be BYOD and IoT. This is done completely agentless. We integrate with Active Directory, we integrate with your switches, etc., and we can identify a machine being corporate by its build, what domain name it's on. It could be a MAC address it has. It could be a combination of all these different things. But we certainly build up a picture completely agentless of what we can control. If we can control it via local admin rights, so local admin rights being the integration with Active Directory, then we have full control over it and we can later administrate it. If it's a non-corporate device, or rather if it's a device that is not on the domain, not connected to the network, but is still owned by the corporation, or indeed it's a BYOD device that's been authorized, then we can treat that in a slightly different way. We could deploy a little secure connector, as we call it, which will give us local admin rights over that machine and then be able to do further checks that we would do later on, such as compliance, etc. But we don't need that to be able to see who, what machine it is, what its makeup is. We just need to have local admin rights over the machine for compliance. So we do this with all of our different buckets. We do it with Windows, as you can see here. We do it with Mac OS. We do it with mobile. We can look at what the mobile devices are, whether they're iOS devices, Blackberries, or Android, etc. We can also integrate as well. I mean, I'm not going to go too much into integration, but the counteract takes very much pride in the fact that it won't make any of your other tools obsolete. It will actually enhance them. We can integrate with SCCM, ServiceNow. We can integrate with MDM. We can integrate with a whole host of different solutions, firewalls, etc., to actually further increase their capability. But without those integrations, of course, we can still deal with the devices in many different ways. For example, if it's a mobile device, you might only allow Android and iOS devices to your network and nothing else. And even then, with those devices, you might want to lock them down via their MAC address or the IMEI or something like that. So just to recap, we classify the devices and we then clarify the devices. We know that they're Windows devices. We know that they're Mac devices. We now need to know who owns them and if they're corporate. Once we've done that and we've built out the policy set to say, okay, you're a corporate device or you're a non-corporate device, we can then later decide what we're going to do with that device. Are we going to allow it on the network? Are we going to block it? Are we going to VLAN it? Are we going to push it to a guest network? All of the above is possible. That's control. I will get onto that briefly in a second, but that's the whole reason of what we're doing here. We need to identify devices that we own and we want on the network, and we need to have a list of devices that perhaps shouldn't have access to our corporate network. And please don't forget That isn't just Windows machines or mobile devices. That's a full range of IoT devices as well. If you have a certain brand of CCTV camera and you only allow that CCTV camera to connect to your network and nothing else, we can do that too. So let's just have a very quick look at what we can see when we have identified a corporate device on our network. We can have a little look here by double-clicking on the device. So we can see things such as its DNS name, we can see its MAC address, we can see its NetBIOS domain name, we can see its NIC vendor, we can see what version of Windows it has on there. We can see that this is Windows Manageable Domain, which means it is connected to our domain. We can see what processes are running on this machine. So if there's any service or services that either you don't want to run or you do want to run, we can make sure that they are running. That list goes on and on and on. If there's a certain version of Java that you don't want to be running, but you want to push out other versions, we can help you do that. We can see whose account this is, whether the account's disabled or locked out, who's connected, when they connected, when they last set their password, for example. We can see the switch port information, where they're connected. We can see whether they've got any external devices connected to their machine. And then further down here, we can see what applications that they're running. We can see what security patches they have, whether they're up to date with antivirus. We can see whether they exist in CMDB as well, but obviously we'll go on to that in a little later on. So we can see a whole plethora of information based on the information that we're picking up from a corporate device. We're slightly limited to what we can see, of course, with non-corporate devices. We won't get as much information as this without the secure connector, but we will still get a basic level of information. Excuse me a second while I just get rid of that screen. There we go. Okay, so that is our visibility. That's how we check BYODs. That's how we check corporate devices. I've given you a very quick look at how we can also look at asset management. So we can see, again, what software is installed, who owns that machine, what serial number it may have, where it is, etc. Brilliant for asset management, brilliant for tagging machines and doing an audit. We talked about network access control. We're now going to talk very briefly about device compliance, possibly the most important part of the counteract is the device compliance. So if it's on my network, is it running antivirus? Is it running my antivirus, and is it up to date? Is it running antivirus, but it's not up to date? Is antivirus installed but not running? Or perhaps antivirus is not installed? Now, very briefly, if antivirus is running and up to date, we're happy. If antivirus is running but not up to date, what we can actually counteract to do is actually to remediate this problem and update the antivirus. Just out of the box, these are a very brief overview of all of the different versions of antivirus that we integrate with. By the tick of a box, we can say, if the antivirus is not up to date, I want you to make it up to date. We can decide if a machine hits this policy that perhaps we're going to put them in a VLAN. We're going to move them out the way because if their antivirus is not up to date, we don't want them on our network. So we can move them to a VLAN, we can update their antivirus, and we can bring them back into play. While this is happening, we could put a pop-up on the screen that notifies the user, please bear with us while we update your antivirus. If antivirus is installed but not running, we can start the antivirus on the machine. So again, counteract can simply send a command without any user interaction, without any delay on anybody's behalf, and we can start the antivirus. If the antivirus is not installed, well then perhaps we need to either push out, perhaps via a script or via group policy, we need to push the antivirus to the machine. And of course, if if there's a further problem, investigate further, then we can put them into a box. We can send a pop-up to the user to say that they need to contact IT immediately. We can notify somebody, a member of IT, and we can deal with it accordingly. Now, that little kind of use case there is very similar to all of our other compliant compliance policies. We can do the same for disk encryption. Are the machines encrypted? And is it running? Is it fully encrypted? Is disk encryption installed but not encrypted? Or do we not have disk encryption installed at all? Disk encryption is installed and fully encrypted, we're happy. Disk encryption is installed but not encrypted, we can force encryption to that machine. Disk encryption is not installed, we can install disk encryption. Now, obviously, that becomes much easier with Windows 10 and BitBlocker installed, but you get the idea. We can further go on to things such as software that we don't want, cloud applications that perhaps we don't want running, or peer-to-peer software, or any other software that perhaps we don't want running, or indeed we do want running. Perhaps in your organization you have some kind of connector that has to be installed on the machines and must be running. Or we can make sure that that is installed, that is running, and if it's not, we can do something about it. We can obviously do the Windows Update compliance. Again, you know, are you requiring any critical, important, moderate patches? Obviously, you know, we can control these policies. So just by the fact that a machine is missing a critical patch doesn't mean that all of a sudden the counteract starts to push out that critical patch, because of course we want you guys to be able to decide on whether those patches need to be installed. But that's where the beauty of the counteract comes in. It can tell you, it can notify you that your machines and your users perhaps are missing patches that should be installed, and give you an absolutely fantastic report that you can print out, you can have delivered to your email every day, every week, etc., that will help you to, more importantly, do your job. We have a quick policy here that's about WannaCry. So out of the 20 endpoints that we're controlling, we have one machine that is potentially infected with WannaCry, 16 not infected. So obviously the not infected we're happy with. The one machine, we're going to send this to a VLAN group. We're going to push it out the way. We're going to get it off our network. Now, this is great for zero-day outbreaks. There is a moderate sense of AI built into the counteract. So we can detect any anomalies that may have happened within your registry, for example. A key that wasn't there yesterday that maybe appears today that slightly is suspicious, we can deal with something like that. Or in fact, if a known outbreak happens, we can write a policy that says, go and look for this, this trend or this security flaw within our Windows machines. Any machines that show potential infection with that, I want them to be VLAN'd and quarantined out the way, and anybody else can carry on as normal. Now, this is fantastic for a zero-day outbreak. It means that within seconds of acknowledging that, that outbreak, you'll have a whole view on your network of what is potentially vulnerable and what isn't vulnerable, and you'll be more equipped to deal with it, you know, whilst not obviously stopping people who are not vulnerable working, for example. Device compliance goes on to a whole host of other kind of scenarios. I'm not going to go into full detail with them, but pretty much I've been doing this job for a number of years now. I've never come across somebody who wanted something that we weren't able to do. The counteract is very intuitive. You can pull it around, twist and turn it. I mean, this is where we come in. Our professional services have seen all sorts of different requirements. We absolutely can help you be able to build a policy up based on your need. Another kind of quick kind of use case there would be, I think you guys get certs, or certainly the NHS get a thing called certs that get sent to them. They are security alerts that they're expected to ensure their network is compliant against. So based on the requirements of that cert, we can teach you and help you to be able to draft up a policy very quickly that has 100% eyes on your network, that will be able to confirm that you are in compliance with that cert request within a few minutes of receiving it. It's absolutely as simple as that, really. So we've covered device compliance, we've covered network access control. I've given you a very brief overview of asset management. Network segmentation we've also discussed, and now you have some idea about incident response as well. I don't think there are much more detail to go in. I'm going to give you two quick overviews. The one is going to be the asset inventory that you can see here. So I'm going to click a button. I'm going to go down to my machines. I'm going to just try and find my Windows machines. Oh, there they are in plain sight. And I can say, okay, out of all of my Windows machines, what versions are they? So boom, straight away, there we go. How many machines are Windows 10? How many machines are Windows 10 Pro? How many machines are servers? Obviously, this is a demo network, so we only have 109 machines, but you can imagine when you have a lot more machines, how good and useful this service is. We click another button, we can see how many services are running, how many versions of Adobe Acrobat are running. If I also click on one of them, we'll be able to see what machines are actually running that service. Windows processes running, again, the same thing. So let's have a look here. There's an Apache service there. What machines on my network are running this Apache service? Very quickly, you can see that. I'm now going to quickly show you how to do a report, I hope. Sometimes we do have a little issue with waiting for the web browser to pop up on this because it's a virtual machine, but let's see whether it works. The reports are based on the fact that you have something that you can very quickly take to your teams, to your exec teams, to your management, etc., and share with them the status of your network, how your machines are, whether they're compliant, whether they're not compliant. And of course, you could use this within your own departments to be able to pass down to different sections. Perhaps you have somebody that deals with the health or the antivirus section on your network. Maybe somebody else deals with Windows updates. Maybe somebody else deals with rogue software. So these reports will give you a very quick overview of what machines are compliant, a little graph there to show you the breakdown, and then a further breakdown of those machines based on MAC addresses, IP addresses, etc., etc. Rich, while I'm bringing up these reports, would you like to just jump in and if you've got anything to add there a second?
Yes, thank you, Mike. Obviously, this is a healthcare specific webinar, and one of the challenges that we've been identifying is the use of medical IoTs and also the different roles of some of the healthcare staff. So you have people coming on and off the network, you have the growth of medical IoTs and life critical devices, and they are becoming an ever increasing headache to manage. And I think some of the things that Mike has gone through today, just to emphasize the fact that this is not a replacement for the tools that are already in use. One of the things that we do actually acknowledge and get reported quite a lot is that whilst there are systems in place that do parts of this, they tend to be a little bit siloed. So you have a system or monitoring tool looking at one area and another monitoring tool looking at another area. And it's those blind spots that could get created from that kind of environment. Unfortunately, hackers tend to expose and go after those blind spots. So one of the things that we actually see from deploying to this is because it's an overlay, because it doesn't conflict, and because it's complementary, as Mike quite rightly pointed out, it maximizes the value and leverages the potential of the systems you already have. It's very easy to engage regardless of what stage of your journey that you're at. Some are a little bit more mature than others. Some have a high staff turnover within the medical profession. Some have external parties that rely on, and when they come onto the network, they bring in their devices, but then they fall outside of the scope of what's currently being looked at. So this really does give peace of mind. I know Mike briefly touched on the WannaCry scenario. Now, I know obviously a lot of people in the healthcare were affected by that, and there were some dramatic impacts to people's scheduling of services and critical services and so on and so forth. But one of the things that this is also used for quite a lot is reporting. So we had a scenario when the WannaCry broke out. Mike was actually out for a meal at one point and saw the news came through, So created a policy, deployed it to all the Force Scouts, and before the exec teams were able to utter the words WannaCry to their IT teams, they were delivered with reports that clearly showed these were all the infected or vulnerable devices. This is what was done, and this is a report that shows that we have a cyber hygiene against that. And I think some of the things that you've seen today from Mike in the way that we can actually control devices. So if in that particular scenario, you were able to say these are the vulnerable devices, you can actually automate segmentation off the network to quarantine them and actually mitigate the spread of that impact. So instead of worrying about the whole organization, or I think as it was reported to me in some cases, unplugging of the internet was the only viable means, you can actually just quarantine those devices and stop it from spreading across the network. But fundamentally, one of the things that we see the greatest advantage of these tools when they're deployed is the simplicity and the reduction on demands on time and resource, because everybody's fighting and competing with and struggling with time. So depending on what the latest trend is, or the latest project, or the latest delay, there's always a reprioritization that's taking place. And this allows things to be delivered on time, minimize impact on resources. So yeah, I see that Mike's obviously brought up some of the reporting. So on that note, I'll go back to you on that, Mike.
Thanks, Rich. Yep, just as you were speaking there, I just thought I would quickly bring up the WannaCry report. I'm once again going to apologise that we're only looking at a very few select devices here, but again, you can get the idea. So hopefully, when Rich was talking there, you watch me spin up this report. It's very easy. It's very quick. The WannaCry infected machines, we can see that 1% or one of our machines, which is actually 5.8%, one of our machines is infected. The rest of our network is not infected. Here's the machine that is infected: IP address, MAC address, DNS name, what user it is, etc., etc. I can also add to this. I can add what switch it's connected to, which port it's connected to, and then the machines that are not infected. So you can give this to your exec team or your teams and use these to build into your reports quite easily. So very briefly there, I'm just going to quickly show you once again how easy it is to produce one of these reports. So I'm going to add another report here. I'm going to add the policy details. I'm going to add this report for my Windows updates. I'm going to select all of my segments. So remember, we talked about different segments, different locations, different departments. I might just want to do this on one particular department, especially if I'm looking for whether a connector or a program is being deployed. Maybe that program only refers to your HR department, for example. So I can use segments, but for now, I'm going to use all IPs or all segments. And then I'm going to select what policy I want to select. So in this case, I'm going to use the Windows Update Compliance policy. I can edit my policy labels here. So you can see, I can say, okay, what do I want to see in my graph? I'm going to have a pie chart for policy breakdown. I want a PDF format, not an Excel. I don't want it sent out to me on a schedule. I just want to run it now. So I'm just going to save it very quickly. There's my policy. I'm going to click on it. Whoops. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click run. And then within a couple of seconds, obviously my report is generated and I'm good to go. I can email this PDF to somebody, etc. So these reports are great. They're great for all sorts of different reasons. They're very easy to do, such as building the policies and actually kind of working your way through getting your system and your deployment into a state where you have full control. We obviously will work with you on that and help you do that. But yeah, you can see there's our policy. So just there's our report. Sorry, just pull it up. So there's our nice little breakdown of our patches. And here's a breakdown of what patches are missing, who's missing the critical, who's compliant. Okay, so that's a reporting, nice and simple, and very effective to use as well. So I think that is probably enough for a high-level overview. I will hand back to Richard now, but please, if you do have any questions and you want to pop online, that's great. So Rich, back to you, mate.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for quite a succinct high-level overview. So hopefully we've covered everything on our demo today in terms of the high-level use cases that we described. Mike, if you can just hand me back as host so I can just pull up the final sort of conclusions. If you can stop sharing your screen for me, Mike. And you should all now be able to see my screen. So obviously we cover these points on the demo today. So just to have a little bit of a recap in terms of how you can obviously do a lot of automation and simplify your hardware and asset management. Mike talked about compliance and access control. And we talked about network segmentation, what you do to actually mitigate the spread of a risk. And obviously we covered off the WannaCry and how you would respond to those incidents. So fundamentally, just to finish on the last point, why is visibility so important? This is something that we discuss with a lot of people because you can't effectively manage what you can't effectively see. And to make risk-based decisions, you need that visibility. So on that note, I've just noticed now that we haven't had any questions come through, so that's good. So if anybody has got questions, feel free to get in contact with the team. We will be circulating a recording of this webinar to the participants because we quite often see that there are other people within organizations that need to get visibility of this high level, but weren't always available to take part in the demo today. So we'll circulate that afterwards. And our team will be in contact very shortly to arrange some further discussions and, if need be, to do some a bit more granular and technical dive into some of the scenarios. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today. And look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thank you.